Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been arrested after arrival at a federal courthouse in Miami. He arrived to loud cheers from his supporters. He faces dozens of charges related to the handling of classified government documents that he took to his Florida home after losing the White House. U.S. correspondent Benji Heyer is outside the courtroom for us now. Benji, we've got some live visuals of protesters outside the courthouse. No doubt Trump supporters who met him with cheers are not entirely happy that he has now been arrested and fingerprinted. I can only imagine that footage of Trump, former President Trump in cuffs, is bound to be incredibly divisive and would no doubt go viral. But was he placed in cuffs outside the courtroom, or did that all happen out of view of cameras?
I think it was all behind closed doors, at least from our vantage point. We've actually just come up to our studio here from the street down below, where throngs of his supporters had camped out over the past few hours to provide their support to the first former US president to face federal charges. And Donald Trump entered the courthouse about an hour ago, but this was all happening beyond the gaze of both his fans and the media who were amassed around the entrance. And then proceedings took place inside, and there were no video cameras allowed indoors. And so essentially waiting for people who were present, the 20 or so reporters or members of the public, to come out with their handwritten notes and tell the world what went on inside. And until that point, it's ultimately a mystery, although we can imagine that what happened inside was that the indictment was read out, that 49-page document outlining the potential crimes, the alleged crimes that Donald Trump may have committed in relation to those 11,000 files that he took from the White House to his private residence. Hundreds, dozens, I should say, were highly classified, and some of which were top secret. He's alleged to have showed them to individuals who did not have the security clearance and also hid them from authorities. It would have been after that indictment was read out that he would have been asked to enter a plea, likely not guilty in his perspective, given the fact he's protested his innocence now for weeks. And then there are some pre-trial motions before we really get any idea as to when this is taken to the next stage, when there is a jury selected, when there is a trial, and when Donald Trump may very well be convicted. He will exit the courtroom after he's done and dusted there, return back to one of his estates in New Jersey, where he will give an address in a few hours' time.
So, Benji, he'll face 37, or is facing 37 criminal charges related to the handling of those classified documents that you just told us about. This is the second indictment. It comes just months after Trump was charged by a Manhattan grand jury in a separate, fresh hush money laundering case, excuse me. Trump has denied any wrongdoing in both cases and vowed to stay in the 2024 race despite the charges. How have his supporters reacted to this new onslaught?
It's a good question, because ultimately you'd expect in perhaps normal circumstances that this would be damaging. 2 arraignments in just over 2 months for an individual who is trying to become president of the United States. That could be detrimental to a campaign. But in that New York case that you mentioned, after that we saw Donald Trump soar in Republican polls, fundraise millions of dollars, have some of his rivals in that race to become Republican nominee actually back him and defend him in this battle with the courts. The way some of his fans see it, at least those that we've spoken to, is that these charges, forgive the pun, are trumped up charges, that Donald Trump is not guilty, that he's being made a scapegoat, that this is an attempt by the current administration to prevent Donald Trump from running in that presidential race at the courts before he can get to the ballot box. And there is real faith within his most loyal of fans that ultimately he will prevail and that he will re-enter the White House in 2024.
Well, he's described it as a witch hunt throughout, even at that the first indictment in Manhattan. But how have, political players in Washington, D.C., for instance, reacted to this second indictment, and that on federal charges?
So, as with so much, with America, it's very much split along partisan lines. Democrats feel that Donald Trump should fill the full force of the law, whilst on the Republican side, many of the established names, House of Speaker, I should say the leader of the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, he has said that this is essentially a political witch hunt, sentiments echoed by one of the major rivals of Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, the governor of the state that we're standing in right now, Florida. There have been some Republican members who are perhaps more reluctant to take Trump's side, including Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor, also trying to become president. But ultimately, we're seeing a lot of the Republican side rally around Trump, and the former president, will try to use that to his advantage as he plows on in this race, refusing to step down even if convicted.
So Trump is expected to speak or to address media later this evening when he goes back to New Jersey. Do we have any idea what time that's expected to be?
Yes, it's going to be in about 5 hours from now. Obviously, this is a little bit fluid, given it's not sure when exactly he'd be, leaving court to then travel up to New Jersey again. But roughly 5 hours' time from now, what we can expect from the speech is very much the same sort of rhetoric he's espousing in past days, that this is a hoax, that he'll one day be vindicated. But as with the speech following the New York conviction that you spoke of before, that turned out to be sort of an hour and a half of a rambling political address, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see the same sort of thing this time round.
Last question before I let you go. If he's been arrested and fingerprinted, does that mean that when the court proceedings wrap up today that he would be released on bail? How does the American system work over there?
I think it depends on the conditions that are in place. There's no sort of status quo, but currently the judicial individuals overseeing this process, which is different to the actual judge overseeing this process to make the whole thing a bit more complicated, those rules will be set out literally as we speak, as Donald Trump sits there in the courtroom. But what you said is the most likely outcome, that he will, in a sense, be a free man able to continue with his campaign until that trial date. And that really is key. Does that trial date come before the presidential election, or does it come after? And if it comes after, and he has won that presidential election, and he is in the White House, US Department of Justice rules say that you cannot convict a sitting president. So his team will look to delay the process as long as they can and try to ensure a favourable jury. The fact this is happening in Florida, a state that leans towards the Republican side, that voted for Trump in both the last two elections, is something that is going to be used by Trump's legal team to their advantage, they hope, and is much more of a benefit for his side of the argument as it would be, say, if the jury was selected from individuals in New York or Washington, D.C. So all eyes will be on who is selected, when that trial takes place, and also, ultimately, what the outcome will be for Donald Trump.
Benji, you have to forgive me, but for me, it's the absolute irony that a sitting US president, whether they've committed a criminal act or not, cannot be convicted. Yes, only in America. But thank you so much for bringing us that update. 5 hours from now, when former US President Donald Trump is expected to speak, most South Africans are probably going to be asleep. But no doubt a lot of people are going to be waking up tomorrow morning to catch some updates on exactly what he said. That was our US correspondent, Benji Hire.